Shalom, Chaverim, and welcome to another episode of Heartfelt Haftarah. Now, you may notice that, in fact, my background has changed significantly. That's because I'm currently in sun-kissed Texoma, up here on the Texas-Oklahoma border. I'm here as a resource scholar for the Interfaith Interseminarian Conference that is held up here every year. As I've noted from the Bima, I am the desperation choice. They lost their usual scholar this year, and so I got a call, and she said, "I am desperate," and I said, "I am the expert on being the desperate choice." So here I am. It's been delightful. It's been very interesting. We've been talking about the Jewish concept of derech eretz, which plays into the whole idea of how do we know how to treat each other beyond what our revelations or our explicit traditions have to teach us. And I think it's been a very rewarding and interesting discussion. So, I want to continue recording our heartfelt haftarot, however. This week, we continue the story in Exodus, and we are now moving very rapidly because that's how the first half of Exodus goes. It goes very rapidly through the story of the confrontation between Moses and Pharaoh and the struggle to free the people and the plagues as they come in their progression. And it's all about messing with Egypt. That's really what it's all about. So, not surprisingly, our Haftarah portion is also about messing with Egypt. Now, I'll get to that in a moment. Just to review, our Haftarah portion comes from Ezekiel chapter 28 and extends over into chapter 29. Ezekiel can be broken up into a number of different units. Just to remind you, Ezekiel is the prophet who was living in the land of Israel at the time that the Judean kingdom fell to the Babylonians, and he is living in the world of exile, and he is bringing his message of comfort to the exiles with the most important reassurance, which would not be even slightly self-evident to the victims of all of this, that the fortunes of Israel will be reversed. That's a tough sell to a bunch of people who've been carried off into slavery, have been integrated into a major metropolitan empire, and there's no reason to think they're going to get home anytime soon. And yet Ezekiel is insistent on that. So that's the ground basis for it. So what's going on in chapters 28 and 29? So the context is that ancient Judah, not a big kingdom by way of ancient Near Eastern kingdoms. It unfortunately is positioned at the roadside for the major campaigns of major empires coming from Europe to Africa, from Africa to Europe, from Asia to Africa, and vice versa, and on it goes. So there's always a major empire about to plow through the neighborhood, and if you're lucky and you're Judean, the armies will stick to the way of the sea along the coast and then head up through the Galilee, in which case Judea and the Judean hills gets bypassed. But quite frankly, having Judea straddling this major strategic route means that more often than not, any empire worth its salt is going to stop long enough to beat down Judah and make sure that it doesn't constitute a threat to their rear as they're going on to conquer bigger and better empires. So, what happened historically is that Judah arranged to be an ally to Egypt as against the expansion of the Babylonians. The Babylonians launched their siege against Jerusalem, and the Egyptians failed to show up. The cavalry did not come. You know, unlike Bastogne, George Patton never showed up with the Third Army to relieve it, and Jerusalem fell. And as a result, there's a lot of anger towards Egypt. And what better place to vent that than when we're talking about how ancient Egypt held us as prisoners, as slaves, and God intervened by miracles to punish the Egyptians. So that's exactly why this has been selected to go with our Torah portion. It's all about punishing Egypt. Now, um, Ezekiel, apparently feeling really strongly about how Egypt failed the Jewish people, uh, gives no less than 6 oracles against the Egyptians. And he assures his audience, his Jewish audience in exile, that in fact Egypt will be laid low, that God will punish them, it'll be awful, etc., etc. Now, that did it ever come to pass? Does a prophet always have to be right? Now, on one level, given the highfalutin rhetoric that Ezekiel uses, the answer is no, it didn't come to pass. Egypt was not destroyed in the kind of hyperbolic way that the prophet describes. So it didn't get fulfilled. And of course, we always have the option when it comes to prophecy to say it hasn't been fulfilled yet. So maybe, around 2050 or 2110, God will get around to doing everything to Egypt that Ezekiel promised. On the other hand, if we don't buy into the hyperbole and we simply think of it in these terms, what happened to the mighty empire of Egypt? It in fact declined into insignificance. Now, come the Middle Ages, come those times beyond, Egypt will revive at different points. It will become part of the Mamluk Empire, or it will become part of the Ottoman Empire, and will have a major role to play. But the fact of the matter is that as an empire, Egypt goes into decline within 100 or 200 years after Ezekiel. So it's not wrong to say it's not fair to say that Ezekiel was completely wrong. The disaster was just more slow motion than his rhetoric would give us to think. Uh, Egypt is no longer the important place that it once was. And in that sense, Ezekiel's words are fulfilled. But what's really important for us, because bearing a grudge, um, it's understandable, but is it really useful to us over the long term? I don't have anything against Egypt. I assume you don't have anything against Egypt. So, what can this Torah portion offer us? Well, the greatest prediction, the greatest prophetic rhetoric is at the beginning and at the end of this Haftarah, where Ezekiel does what he does best, and he assures us that this is not the end of the Jewish people, that we may find ourselves in exile now, that we may be laid low now, but the time will come when there will be a restoration. And indeed, that has happened several times. It certainly happens within a few years after Ezekiel's death, when the people are allowed to return to Judea. Of course, we face further exile, but always, the Jewish people are able to return and to find themselves once again in our land. And that certainly is the reality of our own lifetime. So, Ezekiel, uh, it's a long-term prediction, right? It's an investment. Don't invest in the short term. Always invest with an eye towards the long term, and it will work out eventually. And that's how it's worked out for us. So I want to share with you the words that he writes to the people to comfort them, and I think we'll wrap up at that. So, thus says the eternal God, when I have gathered the house of Israel from the peoples among whom they have been scattered, and made manifest my holiness there in the sight of the nations, they shall dwell again on their own soil, and the soil that I gave to my servant Jacob. They shall dwell on it in safety, and they shall build houses and plant vineyards. And when I execute judgments upon all the surrounding peoples who have shown them contempt, they shall dwell in safety, and they shall know that I, the Eternal, am their God. And this has been fulfilled. This reality is, while we're always anxious about the modern state of Israel, while we're always feeling insecure about its status, the fact of the matter is it's not going anywhere. That while there may be violence directed at Jews, the people dwell on their own soil. They are secure. And the Jewish nation is home. And that's amazing. And this guy predicted that. Pretty good. Pretty good. So I'm delighted to be here among the many nations at our interfaith event. I will smite them and bless them accordingly as the prophet directs. And I look forward to sharing next week's Haftarah with you. So until then, all blessings to you.